Ilara Voss woke before the sun did. She always did. Not because anyone asked her to, but because the hall needed to be clean before the higher-ranked wolves came down for breakfast, and if it was not clean, they would remind her why she was at the bottom. She had learned long ago that it was easier to simply be done before they arrived. She wrapped her hands in strips of old cloth to protect the cracks in her skin from the cold stone floors, picked up her bucket and brush, and began. The great hall of Silverstone Pack was beautiful in the way that old, powerful things always are. High ceilings, stone walls, long wooden tables worn smooth by decades of use. In the early morning, before anyone else was in it, Ilara sometimes let herself simply look at it. She noticed the way the first light came through the narrow windows and landed in thin lines across the floor. She noticed the grain of the wood on the central table and how it curved like a river when you looked at it long enough. She noticed everything, she just never said so. The pack called her the Hollow One, a nickname that had started years ago and stuck the way unkind things always do. They said she had no wolf. They said the moon goddess had either forgotten her or made her as a mistake. They said she was filling the space where a real pack member should have been. Ilara had heard all of it. She cleaned the hall anyway. She was 19 years old, the lowest-ranked Omega in Silverstone, and she had not spoken more than a few words in a row to anyone in almost 4 years, not since the day she understood that no one was listening. Her mother had disappeared when Ilara was 15, just gone one morning, like a candle blown out. Ilara had gone to every ranking wolf she could find. She had knocked on the beta's door. She had waited outside the alpha's hall for 2 hours in the rain. No one searched, no one asked questions. A woman of no rank had simply ceased to exist, and the pack moved on before the week was out. Ilara stopped singing that same week. She had loved to sing. Her mother used to say she had a voice like running water. After her mother was gone, it felt wrong to make beautiful sounds, in a world that had been so careless with something precious. So she became quiet, and the quiet, over time, became armor. By the time the rest of the pack came down for breakfast, the hall was spotless. Ilara took her place near the kitchen door and waited. She would eat when they were finished, with whatever was left. This was the way things were done, and she did not waste energy resenting it. She used that energy for other things. She used it to watch. Soren, the beta's son, came in laughing loudly about something that had happened the night before. He was tall and confident in the way of someone who had never once been told he was not enough. He glanced at Ilara as he passed, the way a person glances at furniture, and then looked away. Once, about a year ago, he had told her in front of a full table that the moon goddess must have created her as a placeholder, something to fill a spot until a real wolf came along. He had smiled when he said it. The table had laughed. Ilara had refilled his water cup without a word. Kala, the alpha's daughter, came in next. She was sharp-featured and watchful, the kind of person who always seemed to be measuring the distance between herself and any possible threat. She had a habit of engineering small disasters for Ilara. Spilled cleaning supplies blamed on carelessness. Missing items reported as stolen. A sleeping mat soaked with cold water one night, while Ilara was still on it. Kala never did these things where anyone important could see. She was far too careful for that. Ilara had long since stopped leaving anything she valued where Kala could reach it. Dax, the pack's head warrior, sat at the far end of the table. He was quiet in a different way than Ilara. His quiet was the quiet of someone who had simply decided that most things were not his problem. He had watched Kala pour cold water on Ilara's mat. He had met Ilara's eyes briefly afterward, and then looked down at his food. She had not forgotten. She did not hate any of them. Hate was expensive. She simply knew exactly who they were. The blood moon came at the end of that month. It was an event that happened once every generation, and the whole pack treated it with a reverence they showed almost nothing else. The moon goddess was believed to be closest to the earth on blood moon nights, present enough to hear, present enough perhaps to act. The pack gathered in the sacred clearing in the forest, just beyond the pack grounds, and performed their rituals. The alpha led the howl. Rank moved down from there, each wolf adding their voice in order. Omegas were not permitted inside the circle. Ilara stood at the tree line as she had every year, close enough to see, far enough away that no one would tell her to move back. The night was cold. The moon was enormous and deep red, hanging so low in the sky it seemed impossible. The clearing was lit by torches arranged in a wide ring, and inside it, Silverstone's wolves stood with their chests open to the sky. Alpha Kale Dravan began the ritual. He was an older man, broad and heavy with authority, someone who had built his power carefully over decades and held it with both hands. His voice when he spoke the old words was strong and certain. And then he stopped. He did not fall exactly. He lowered, the way a structure lowers when something underneath it gives way. He was on one knee in the dirt before anyone understood what was happening, and then both knees, and then his hands were on the ground and he was breathing hard and looking around as though he could not quite understand where he was. The pack went still. Then the light changed. Alara noticed it first, because she was always watching. The moonlight, which had been falling evenly across the clearing, began to gather. That was the only word for it. It gathered, the way water gathers before it pours, and it moved. Not toward the Alpha, not toward Soren or Kala or Dax, or any of the ranked wolves standing inside the circle, with their hands raised and their eyes closed. It moved toward the tree line. It moved toward her. Alara did not step back. She was not sure she could have moved if she wanted to. The light reached her, and it was warm, deeply and strangely warm, warmer than the sun had ever felt on her skin. It did not blind her. It settled around her, like something being placed gently, like hands being laid carefully on someone who had been waiting to be touched for a very long time. The pack turned. All of them. Every ranked wolf in that clearing turned and looked at the girl at the tree line, the hollow one, the Omega with no wolf, standing in a circle of gathered moonlight with her cracked hands at her sides and her eyes wide open. The voice that followed was not loud. It did not need to be. It was the kind of voice that simply arrived inside you, like a truth you had always known but never had words for. This one, the first who served without asking for anything in return, the first who carried her pain without making it a weapon against others, the first who loved this land more than it ever loved her. She is what a Luna was always meant to be. She is the first true Luna alive. The words ended. The light did not leave, but it softened, settling into Alara's skin as though it belonged there. The clearing was absolutely silent. Alara could hear her own heartbeat. She could hear the breathing of every wolf standing in that circle, suddenly uncertain, suddenly aware that the ground had shifted beneath all of them. She breathed in, she breathed out. And then something woke up inside her. She had always imagined, when she allowed herself to imagine, that her wolf would arrive like something breaking free, sudden and loud and impossible to contain. But Sable did not arrive that way. Sable simply rose, the way the sun rises, steadily and without apology, and she was there. An ash-white wolf, large enough that several of the warriors in the clearing took an involuntary step backward when they saw her. Her eyes were the color of winter light. She stood beside Alara, with the calm of something that had been waiting patiently for a very long time, and was not in any hurry now that the wait was over. Alara placed her hand on Sable's back. Sable leaned into it slightly. The walk back to the pack grounds was the longest of Alara's life. She did not hurry. She moved at the pace of someone who no longer had anything to prove. The morning after the blood moon, Soren came to find her. He was different when he approached. The confidence was still there in the way he moved, but it was sitting less easily on him now, like a coat that no longer fit quite right. He smiled the way people smile when they are trying to look like the smile is natural. He said her name for the first time that she could remember. He said it warmly, as though they had always been on easy terms, as though the years of quiet cruelty were a thing neither of them needed to dwell on. Alara looked at him for a long moment. Sable stood behind her, still and enormous, watching. "I know exactly who you are," Alara said. It was the longest thing she had said to anyone in years, and she said it simply, without anger, without satisfaction. Just the truth. So does she. Soren looked at Sable. He took a step back. He left without saying anything else. Kala was harder. She did not come with false warmth. She came 3 days later with something raw in her face. Something that might have been anger or might have been grief, and she stood in front of Alara with her arms crossed and her jaw tight. "Why you?" she said. She did not bother to make it a real question. It came out as an accusation. "I have done everything right. Everything that was asked of me. Every ritual. Every duty. Every expectation. Why you? Ilara considered this. She could see that Kala was genuinely suffering, genuinely unable to understand, and that beneath the cruelty there had always been someone desperate to be seen as worthy. She almost felt sorry for her. She was not sure sorry was the right thing to feel. You were performing, Ilara said finally. You were doing everything right so that the right people would notice. I was just living. Kala stared at her. Then she turned and walked away, and Ilara did not know if those words had landed as something useful, or simply as another wound. She hoped for the former. She could not control the rest. Dax came on the third morning. He came alone, and he came quietly, which told her he had thought about this carefully before deciding to come at all. He stood in front of her without any of the ease he usually carried, and he looked like a man who had spent several nights awake with something uncomfortable. He knelt, not dramatically, not with any ceremony, just lowered himself to one knee in the dirt of the pack courtyard and looked up at her. I should have stopped it, he said. There were a lot of mornings, a lot of things I saw and decided were not my problem. Ilara held his gaze. She let the silence sit for a moment, because the silence was honest and it deserved its space. Yes, she said, you should have. And then, after a breath, stand up. There is work to do. He stood. He looked at her like someone trying to understand the shape of a thing they had never seen before. She turned back to what she had been doing, and after a moment, he asked if she needed help. She told him she did. It was the beginning of something. The changes that came to Silverstone were not loud. There was no dramatic moment of overthrow, no fire or fury. Alpha Kale stepped down at the end of that week, not because he was forced out, but because something had collapsed inside the story he had been telling himself for 30 years, and without that story, he did not know how to continue. He sat across from Ilara in the hall one morning and told her this with the plainness of a man who was too tired to be anything but honest. She respected him more in that conversation than she had in all the years before it. She asked for 3 months before she accepted any formal title. No one argued. She spent those 3 months the way she had spent most of her life, watching, listening, learning. She sat with the oldest wolves in the pack and asked them about its history. She sat with the youngest and asked them what they needed. She walked the borders and learned the land. She spoke to the other Omegas and learned their names and their stories, some of which made her want to weep, some of which made her want to rebuild everything from the foundation up. She did not weep, she took notes. When she finally accepted the role of First True Luna, she changed one thing immediately and announced it in the Great Hall on her first morning. The Omegas eat first, she said. No explanation, no justification, just the new rule, plain and clean. There were people who did not like it. She noted who they were, and continued. The story closes where it begins, the Great Hall of Silverstone, before the sun has fully risen. But the hall is different now. There is warmth in it, light on inside, the sound of conversation not kept low out of fear. The lowest ranked wolves sit at the long table, with hot food in front of them, and voices that do not drop when they speak. Ilara stands in the doorway, not at the head of the table, not raised above anyone, just present, just watching the people she is responsible for being full and warm and unafraid. Sable sits beside her, vast and quiet, eyes half closed. The moon goddess gave Ilara nothing she did not already carry. She gave her no new strength, no new wisdom, no power she had not built herself in the cold and the silence and the long years of endurance. She simply made the world stop pretending it could not see. And that, in the end, was enough.